Brothers and sisters, welcome back to this really interesting discussion here in Dawah Workshop. The preservation of the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is a whole bigger and wider subject, which is beyond the remit of what we want to discuss now. It is important. It's a topic that you will find, especially new Muslims or even people who are interested in Islam, they will come across this topic. So having some understanding of it, or at least being able to know where to get the information, is important. Because there are these questions that people have around the authenticity of the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. By the way, it's interesting that there are non-Muslims now trying to do the same with the Quran. So there are Muslims who say, oh, we only accept the Quran, it's the only thing that's authentic. Their statement is based upon ignorance. There are many hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam which are mutawatir. There are quite a number of hadith that, I mean scientifically, in terms of the process through which and by which the Quran has been preserved, there are hadith similarly preserved. That's the process of preservation. I'm not talking about we believe the Quran is preserved. That's a point of view of faith. I'm talking about being able to examine it from a scientific point of view. Do you understand the difference? So we have statements of the Prophet that from a scientific point of view or from an academic point of view reach the same level of authenticity as the Quran. Right? But this is a big subject. We don't want to go into it too much, inshallah. But it's sufficient anyway that there are many verses in the Quran that indicate to any clear-minded, reasonable person that whoever believes in the Quran must also follow the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Many, many, many verses. So many. Yeah? Okay. Any more questions or any more issues that a person may encounter a barrier between that person taking Shahada? No, nothing else? Okay, so there are a few things that I wanted to cover, and these are common contentions to the go-rap. One of these common contentions, one of the issues that is brought up, which I don't think we clarified in enough detail, is the problem of evil. This is a famous or a favorite argument of atheists. There are several ways to deal with the problem of evil, and I don't want to go into this in huge depth. But what is quite interesting is that for an atheist to even raise the problem of evil is problematic for the atheist. Let me explain what I mean by that. Most atheists, almost without exception, believe in the theory of evolution. If you believe truly in the theory of evolution, you cannot believe that there is such a thing as evil. Because everything that happens is just a natural process. So to give you a simple example, if you see a lion running and pouncing on a little baby deer and eats it up, do you think, oh, what an evil lion? Look at that evil lion eating the baby deer. No. Why is that not evil? Why don't we think of it as evil? Why? That's just what a lion does. It's just its nature. But if you believe in the theory of evolution, everything is nature. Human beings, we are part of nature. That's the common origin of the species, that we human beings are, along with every other creature, we have a single origin. We are nothing different. We're just part of nature. So there's nothing that is unnatural. Everything that human beings do is part of nature. So when Hitler killed 6 million Jews, if you really believe in evolution, you can't say that's evil. That's just nature. Just like a lion killing a deer. You can't describe it as evil. That's just the natural process of evolution taking place. Survival of the fittest. When terrorists blow up buildings, it's not evil. Just nature. Evil is just an illusion, surely, if you're an atheist. So the sheer fact that an atheist brings up the issue of evil, there's so much suffering, there's so much evil, there's so much bad in the world, shows an internal contradiction within themselves. Because human beings fundamentally do believe and recognize there is something that we consider to be evil. And only the most virulent, hardcore atheists, right, will actually go to the extent of saying, no, there is no such thing as evil. Evil is an illusion. Good and evil is an illusion. There's no such thing. There's just natural processes. So that's the first thing. The fact that they bring up the concept of evil shows an inherent contradiction in their own philosophy. Actually, the existence of consciousness, of human beings' ability to choose, itself is a recalcitrant fact for these materialists. In other words, it's a fact that flies in the face of their ideas. It goes strongly against their theories and their ideas. So this is one interesting point. The other interesting point is the existence of evil has nothing to do with the existence of God. If you think about it, where is the logical connection? If there are bad things happening, does that mean there's not a creator? I heard someone once say, if I do something naughty and my mother comes and slaps me, do I then believe my mother doesn't exist? No, I'm absolutely even more sure that she exists. Right? There's no logic in this statement of the atheist at all, if you think about it. No logic at all. Oh, there's so much suffering in the world, therefore there can't be a God. There is no logical connection between the two things, by the way, which this is an emotional argument. You have to understand, the atheist is giving you an emotional argument. The interesting thing is they pretend to be rational, but they have very little rational argument to put forward. One of their strongest arguments and their most persistent arguments is an emotional argument, not a rational one. Because the reason we have said in Go Rap, the reason why we believe and we think you should believe that there's a creator is because the creation is organized, it's systemized. We can see that, it's manifest, it's clear. We can see systems, we can see laws. They are complex, they are highly complex. The most reasonable explanation is that there is something that has ordered them and created them and made them like that. Whether there is bad things happening or not has got nothing to do with it. Maybe some of you or some people who are watching have seen there is a film, well, there's a whole series of films, right, called Saw. I think it's called Saw. Anyway, it's about some guy who tortures people. He puts them in this like big building and then, you know, he chains them up and they have to chop their hands off to get out and they have to go through all of these horrific tortures. Either they're being tortured or someone else is being tortured or they have to torture someone else. So the whole thing is, really basically the whole thing is a test. They've done bad things. This guy has picked them up, put them in this situation, and then he's giving them a chance, in a sense, to redeem themselves. To really see, you know, what are they made of? Now, I mean, if you found yourself in that situation, with all of these torture devices, would you presume that it was a product of random events? That no one had created it? No one had built it? No. Exactly the opposite. So, you may decide that God likes torturing people. You may decide that the whole universe has decided to torture us, and that's why there's so much evil. So you may say that God is the God of torture. You might come to that conclusion, but there's no logical reason to come to the conclusion that there is no God. By the way, this is also a problem that is mostly confined to Christianity. Because the Christians say God is love. We do not say God is love. We say God is al-wadud, which means He is the loving, but it is not God is love in an absolute sense. God is al-wadud, but He is also shadid al-iqab. God is also the severe in punishment. One of the attributes of God is that He is the severe in punishment. So the fact that God punishes is one of God's attributes. And do we not see that evident and manifest in creation? That people are punished? Yes or no? That people suffer? Yes or no? Yes, we do. So actually, this agrees with what we believe. God is not only merciful and forgiving and compassionate, but He is also the one who punishes. And His punishment is severe. He is also the one who is just. Justice requires not only reward and forgiveness, but also punishment and retribution. So all of these are the attributes of God. So this problem of evil, of course, in respect to actually discussing the existence of God, is mute. The other point being is that there may be very good reasons why God has allowed suffering to take place. To give an example, if I see two of my children fighting, I might decide not to intervene. Okay, brothers and sisters, we're going to take a short break now. We'll be back very soon, inshallah. Don't go away. Welcome back, brothers and sisters. Let's continue with our discussion in our Dawah workshop. Justice requires not only reward and forgiveness, but also punishment and retribution. So all of these are the attributes of God. So this problem of evil, of course, in respect to actually discussing the existence of God, is mute. The other point being is that there may be very good reasons why God has allowed suffering to take place. To give an example, if I see two of my children fighting, I might decide not to intervene. I might decide to let them continue fighting. Not because I like my children fighting, but because I believe that they need to sort their own problems out. This was, by the way, my mother's philosophy in bringing me and my brother up. She never ever interfered. I don't even remember once when she interfered or acted as a judge between me and my brother, ever. She said, don't come to me with your fights, sort it out between yourself. She would say, I don't know which one of you is going to tell me the truth and which one is lying to me, so you know what? You sort it out. And you know what? Me and my brother learned to get on. We hardly fought at all. Maybe once we had a serious fight. You know, anything that came close to being a serious, like a real sort of fight, once. And that was over a squash game, you know, because we were both really bad losers. So it was a good philosophy, right? I think my mother was really wise in the way she dealt with me and my brother like that. So just because God is not interfering, it doesn't mean God doesn't exist. It may be that there is a great wisdom why God is doing that. And then on top of that, what does free will mean? Free will means that you have to be able to make mistakes. You have to be able to allow these things to happen. So the question is here, how much intervention do you want? Let's think about it. So if God intervenes at this stage, well, were you complaining? Why doesn't he intervene in this? And if he doesn't intervene in that, you'll complain he doesn't intervene in that. And you know, soon you'll get to the stage, if the only thing is you have an itchy head, you'll say, why does God let my head itch? So unfair. So much suffering in my life. You see? Because it's the nature of the human being. Whatever there is, you'll be complaining about it. So, the point being is that if God allows these things to happen, it's not because he is powerless to intervene. It's because there is a wisdom behind it. There is a reason behind it. And this goes back to the black box. This goes back to, why does God let these things happen? This is a big question. And you can even introduce this in Go Rap. You know, in the bridge between the oneness of God and revelation, you can even introduce the concept of evil. You can even say, one of the questions so many people have is, why do so many bad things happen if there is a God? And you can say, this doesn't mean God doesn't exist. What it means is that we need to know, why does God let these things happen? So the only answer can come from God, from Allah, from the Creator. Everything else is guesswork. So that's also why we need revelation. One of the reasons we need revelation is to understand, why does God let these things happen? So we find the Quran tells us, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْغَفُورُ. That Allah has created death and life, that he is going to test which of you is best in conduct, and he is the mighty and he is the forgiving. Yes, that's the problem of evil. Now, there are some things that some people may also put forward as an objection to Go Rap. You may have gone through the whole of Go Rap, and they may say, now a Christian may say, Muhammad was inspired by the devil. This actually is a fourth alternative to the three alternatives we gave when we discussed what are the possibilities about anybody making a claim. We said first they could be a liar, or they could be deluded, or they could be speaking the truth. Well, this is actually a fourth possibility. They could be inspired by the devil. Well, actually, that's sort of similar to being deluded, in the sense that they think that they are something, but they're not. So it's actually similar to being deluded, but it's being deluded in a specific way. It's being misled. So it's not here a simple case of a mental condition. The person is actually being misled. And it is certainly true that it is possible that the shaitan could give a person some help through jinn or some knowledge. As we know, the devils, they listen in. So from that they may get some knowledge of the unseen. So it's very easy to see how, using this method, a person may become deluded, or using these methods as well, a liar could actually add to their arsenal of ways of deceiving people. So you find many of these so-called holy people and these gurus, they're actually just using magic, and they are working with the devils in order to misguide people. And that is how they are able to do things that seem to be like miracles. So this is what you can find. So this is a very important issue. How do you distinguish between this one and that? This itself is a wider topic, but in specific response to the Christian who would claim that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was inspired by the devil, the Quran actually responds to this. Does anyone know what the Quran says? The response to this is already in the Quran. Yes. What does the Quran say?
It's mentioned in the Surah Haqqa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he is not a magician, or Allah is responding all those things.
Yeah. But Allah gives a logical reason, or He gives an explanation. So that's not what I'm thinking of. Allah actually gives a reason as to why that doesn't make sense. So in the sense that He doesn't just refute it by saying, no, He's not. Allah gives a reason why that is not a sensible statement. By the way, you notice as well, brothers, that this rational approach is a Quranic approach. The Quran itself is full of these rational answers and rational discussions. Yes?
Whenever we start reciting the Quran, we say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitan.
That's not specifically. There is a specific statement in the Quran. We'll get to that, what you said afterwards. There is a specific statement in the Quran that refutes this.
Evil does not order do good things.
Okay, so thank you. The general meaning of the verse says that it's not in the nature of the devil to guide people to such things as what you find the Quran is guiding people to. Why would the devil guide people to believe in one God? Why would the devil guide people to believe in the Day of Judgment, the hellfire, and the paradise? Why would the devil guide people to speak the truth and not lie, to obey your parents, to be good to your relatives, to enjoin what is right and to forbid what is wrong? Why would the devil inspire a person with something like the Quran that is inviting people to everything that is good and prohibiting them from everything that is evil? Furthermore, this is one of the few times, especially when I'm talking to a Christian, you don't need to mention this because that is sufficient. But furthermore, as Arshi mentioned, that every time before we read the Quran, what do we say? We say, A'udhu billahi, I seek refuge with God, minash shaitan, from the devil, ar-rajim, the rejected. So not only the Quran is teaching us that the devil is our enemy, but furthermore, the Quran is telling us to seek refuge with God from the devil. To suggest that the devil would inspire someone to do that is now bordering on the absurd. Furthermore, this itself contradicts the Christian's own belief and their own book. Because it's interesting that what the Christians are accusing the Prophet Muhammad of is the same thing the rabbis and the Sadducees were accusing Jesus of. Because they found that Jesus was throwing out devils. He was exorcising devils from people. So they said, he casts out devils in the name of the devil. So they were trying to accuse him of exorcising devils in the name of the devil. So Jesus responded to this according to their books by saying that how can a house divided against itself ever stand? If there is a family, a house meaning in those days a family, if there is a family and everyone is infighting in the family, how are they going to protect themselves against their enemies if they're so busy fighting themselves? It will never stand. You're too busy destroying yourself. You'll not be able to stand the tests and the difficulties that come your way if you're too busy fighting and destroying yourself. It's ridiculous. So applying that same statement that Jesus said, we say, well, every time before we recite the Quran, we say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. So how can a house divided against itself ever stand? So it's a very duplicitous and dishonest approach from the Christian. There are other really strange things that I have heard people say in respect to objecting or coming up with alternatives to accepting the Quran is from God and that Muhammad is the messenger. One of the things I've heard someone say is that Muhammad was a time traveler. Yeah, a time traveler. He used to travel in time. How did he know the information, the scientific facts? Because he traveled in time. The funny thing was, the person who said this was a policeman, a senior policeman in UK. Which gets you worried, right? If that's what your police are ready to say, you're going to get a bit worried, right? Who committed this crime? He was a time traveler, right? That's my explanation. I mean, can you imagine, right? This is a policeman. Would you accept this in a court of law? Could he put this forward as any serious proposition, as a report in a police report? This crime happened. The only reason we can explain is the thieves must have been time travelers. And the funny thing is that the night before he said this, he'd been watching a movie, right? Back to the Future, which is about... The point here is someone who just doesn't want to admit the facts. That's the reality. That's clear and obvious. This is not really a rational explanation. The other thing that people have suggested, and this possibly may become more and more popular, especially if you watch certain videos, aliens, right? Aliens from outer space brought this knowledge to the Prophet Muhammad. We're going to have to finish it here, brothers and sisters, for now. But don't forget to join us for another episode of Dawah Workshop.
Abdur Raheem مشفق متعطف لا ينتهي بالحصر ما أعطاه رب رحيم مشفق متعطف